Hi and welcome. My guest today has an incredibly sad story to share. Some of you may even know it. It happened on December 2010, just days before Christmas. It was a horrific car accident that claimed the life of her husband and father of her children. Take a look at this. On December 17, 2010, Scott Albright was on his way home from work in the night hours when a 2002 Lincoln Navigator crossed the yellow divider line on Montauk Highway in Brookhaven and struck his vehicle. Scott was pronounced dead at the scene. The driver of the Navigator was intoxicated with a blood alcohol level of .11. Scott's wife Deborah was awakened at 3 a.m. that morning by detectives giving her the devastating news that her husband was killed by a drunk driver. Scott Albright was killed at the hands of a drunk driver. His wife Deborah is here today to share this heartbreaking story and what it's like raising their 3 young children all on her own. Drunk driving affects millions of families each year, so why do people continue to drink and get behind the wheel of a car? How can we put a stop to this and save innocent lives? Stay tuned to find out. Hi and welcome. The guest on today's show has a very extremely sad story to share with all of you. Several years ago, she had lost her husband and the father of her children in a drunk driving crash. Please meet Deborah. Deborah is the wife that is survived by the husband that she had lost several years ago. She's here to share her story today and what it's like to have lost the man that she was married to for 12 years, as well as the father of her children, and how she copes every day. Also joining us today are representatives from the MAD program, which we'll get to them in just a little bit. But first, Deborah, let's start with you. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for being here today. As you are aware, drunk driving is on the rise and has been for so long. Your family is actually victims to this. Your husband was taken from you in a drunk driving crash. Can you take us back to that night that actually happened and tell us about it?
Yep, it was a Friday night. He was working late. He worked for Stop and Shop, and I had gone to bed. It was a Friday evening, and about 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up to banging on the door and ringing of the bell, and my first thought was, why couldn't he just use his key or come in the garage entrance? So I went down the stairs, and I saw a face peering through the window of the door, and again, I thought, where's your key? And when I flipped on the outside light, I saw the police badge on the side window, and I just knew that something was very wrong. And there's no real way to explain how you feel at that moment, but I just prayed, and I felt really the presence of the Lord hold me up, and I opened the door, and there were 2 police detectives with my husband's driver's license. And they asked me if this was my husband, and I said yes, and I asked if he was in a hospital, could I go see him, and the policeman said, no, you can't, and I said, well, where is he? And he said, he's, and he kind of choked on it, and I said, is my husband alive? And he said, no, ma'am, he's not, and I'll never forget those words, no, ma'am, he's not. And they came in the house, and he asked if I had children, and all of a sudden I was, yes, I have 3 kids, they're upstairs. And he said, do you want to call somebody? And I couldn't even find a phone, and I couldn't think, and it's just been like that ever since.
Yeah. Well, let me just say this is very brave and courageous of you to do this today, because this is not an easy subject for you, I can see, and it's still, even though it was several years ago, it was 2010, it's still probably so fresh in your mind. I mean, even when you saw the policeman at the door, I mean, did you even expect something this tragic had happened?
Well, I knew they police don't come to your door at 3 in the morning unless it's something bad. And when I saw his face on the driver's license, I just knew.
Did he always work nights, your husband?
We both worked nights. I worked in the ER as a nurse, and we worked opposite weekends. So he was on call that weekend, so he had been called out.
Okay, so this wasn't anything new, so, waking up and hearing the door banging,
Well, that part was new. He always had a key, it was never, and it was a shock. It
Yeah,
was just
I can
a
imagine.
shock.
And it still is, I'm sure. I mean, just looking at your face, it's like it kind of just happened. And it's so sad that this continues to happen to so many innocent families like yourselves. I mean, you're left with the 3 children that the both of you were raising. I mean, what is it like to have to be not only a single parent, but the way you've become a single parent and having to raise these kids?
I feel like the weight of the world is on my shoulders 24/7.
Yeah.
I just look at them and my heart breaks over and over again. To have to answer questions that I don't have answers to have to teach them lessons of life that I myself have struggled with, to watch them grow up without a dad, to see them at ball games and at school events and even church. When I go to church, I still can't make it through a whole service, seeing other families there and praising God when I am so, angry and struggling, and to answer their questions, to do homework with them and teach them math, and
Right.
when part of me is, who cares what math is right
Yeah.
now, or just to watch them cry and the raw emotion that comes out of them sometimes. And
What is life like in your house on a daily basis with your children? I understand they continue to ask you, why did Daddy die? I mean, what is that like to hear that from your children, who are 3 beautiful children, a girl, lovely little girl. They're here today, actually. They're backstage. And, to hear that they're all under 10 years old, I mean, to have to go through this, what is it like for you as a parent to see that?
Well, we rely heavily on the Lord, very heavily, and all 3 of my children know God. They fully understand that Scott is in heaven with Jesus, and 2 of them are okay with that, and my one son Alex and I are the ones that struggle and say but God quite often. I have to explain to them that every time we get into a car we're not going to die, or every time they get cut and bleed, it doesn't mean you're going to die. And they feel now every time they fall down, that's it, they're going to heaven, and they scream out. Sometimes my daughter, I don't want to go to heaven, I don't know the way to heaven, and it just breaks my heart that these kids have to think of life like that now.
So young. Again, they're all under the age of 10, and they're absolutely beautiful, and it's so sad that this man who, drunk driving is no accident, as so many people have said, and we did a Facebook poll today. I was talking to you early before the show. So many people are, of course, against it, but it's not an accident. People are conscious enough to have that drink and then get behind the wheel. It's really not an excuse, and this is the after effects. This is what it does to families like yourselves. What was your children's reaction when they first had to hear that their father was killed in an accident?
Amanda was 5. I don't think she fully grasped what happened. Evan cried so much and then just internalized everything, and he's very not very verbal about it. Alex cries all the time, has a hard time with anger, and he tries to take on the role of the father in the house, and it's way too much for that little boy, but he keeps trying to do it. It just pops out of their mouth. If Dad were here, we'd be playing hockey right now, or if Dad were here, we'd be going here, and you're in the middle of your day, and all of a sudden you stop in your tracks and go, oh, you're right, if Daddy were here. But Daddy's not here, and we have to go on. And
what gives you the strength to go on every day? I mean, I know you have your children. That's probably your biggest reason. But if you were just a single woman, just married, I mean, aside from having children, what gives you the strength to go on every day and have to cope with this?
The only thing that gives me the strength is Jesus. And it's not a cliche answer. It's not a pat answer. It's just when I am crying out. Like, it sounds like a wounded animal sometimes, the crying, the anger, the frustration, the fear, and there's a peace that settles over me and just helps me get through it. It doesn't take it away, although there are times when it feels so powerful that I feel like I can do it. And then there are other days when they'll ask me to make them toast, and I'll collapse and say, oh my God, I can't do this. I just can't do this anymore. But each day, you really have no choice. You have to go through it.
And you have such a strong bond with your children. Just the few minutes that I saw you all together, and before they had gone backstage. I mean, I'm sure you're all there for each other, which makes the coping easier. But it certainly doesn't ease the pain. It may never go away. And I mean, how do you live with knowing that this pain may never go away? That the loss of your husband.
It's kind of cyclic. I have anger. I have severe anger issues, and I get frustrated, and I go back to that night and wish and hope and pray, couldn't we just have gone a different way home, or couldn't this guy just have not gone that road, and then I have to just stop myself and say, this is no good. This does me no good. There is no way to stop it. And I have a little saying. I say, it happened, it's over, forgive and move on. And I just stop myself in my tracks, and I just try to stay hopeful and say, God brings everything together for good in the end, and there's a purpose, and we just have to trust him in that. And the kids are great. Before I even came here, Alex prayed with me, and he just said, Mama, don't worry. Don't worry, Mommy. And it helps. It really does.
My goodness. And one of the reasons that you had stopped working is because your children do fear that every time you get into a vehicle that something bad is going to happen.
I went back to work. I tried to go back to work twice, and one night my son hugged me before I left, and he said, Mommy, I hope you don't die on the way home from work tonight. And I called in, and I never went back, because I can't have that pressure on me that if something happens to me, they're all alone. So it's kind of a prison-like, because I don't even go out to a movie without them, or we don't go anywhere without them. I just am terrified. If something happens to me, they're alone. And, that too will get better, I'm sure, in time. But for right now, it's us four, and that's what we do.
Right. It's so sad, though. And you've actually found the strength. And this is something that I'm going to ask you to explain, because we did an audience poll today on our Facebook page about forgiving and forgetting somebody that takes, a loved one from you in a drunk driving accident. You forgave the man that did this, that took the life of your husband. How did you do that?
I forgave him at first because it's what God calls us to do. And I said the words, but I knew my heart wasn't in it. And I kept saying the words, and I went to one of his arraignments, and I saw him, and I've never felt so much anger in all my life. I stared at him, and I wanted to just make him hurt the way I hurt. And I felt like that for a very long time, but it wasn't good for me. It wasn't helping me. And I knew I had to forgive him, but I also knew I could not do that without God's help. And when I saw him at the sentencing, he looked like a broken man. He didn't look the same. He said he was sorry. Do you believe he was? Was he remorseful? I believe he was remorseful. I don't ever in my heart believe he set out to do what he did. And the impact of it, I think, will haunt him the rest of his life. I know his friend was in the audience of the courtroom with me, and he came up and hugged me afterwards and said, thank you so much for forgiving, and that I pray, he can accept this, and other people will never, ever do this again.
Right. And did your children find the same strength to forgive him as well?
They forgive right away. Yeah, right away they said, it's not his fault. I want to say it's not his fault when it actually is his fault. I tell them, he's not a bad man, don't hate him. He's a man who made a bad choice, and that there are consequences to every choice we make. And it's very real consequences, and to take it seriously. I don't have a sip of liquor before I drive now. I didn't before, but now I consciously, I watch people and I see them drink, and then go for their keys, and I say, really? Look at me, look at my family, Scott. And you're doing this? And they said, it's okay, it's worn off, or it's gone, and I just shake my head and say, absolutely not. There's no tolerance for this. This can be avoided.
Right, absolutely.
It can absolutely be stopped. It's one thing that can be controlled.
All it takes is one drink. It affects everybody differently, and that's
this
what
man
people
was
don't
not
realize.
very much over the legal limit. Not at all.
No. But he did have other charges against him. He was also a known felon. I mean, does that also kind of add to the anger that you have for him, that he is so careless with his driving record, and
No, actually that didn't, because as that crossed my mind, I thought, well, would it have been any better if it was a mother like me who accidentally had a few and hit somebody and killed them? I don't think it would make a difference. I mean, the bottom line is Scott is still gone. He is still dead. Nothing will ever change that. I had to come to grips with that. Once I realized nothing will ever change that, no matter how many years this man sits in prison, if he gets out, if he gets a license, if he doesn't have a license, none of that makes the pain any better. When he was sentenced, I felt no relief, no joy. It didn't help. And I was somewhat shocked. I said, but it still hurts. Yeah. And I thought when I got past the first year that it would get better, but it still hurts, and it's going to hurt.
It's going to be almost 3 years in December of 2013, I believe.
Yeah.
Did you, even though you just said that it didn't affect you at all, however long he got in jail, I mean, do you agree with the sentence that he got? I mean, what was the sentence?
He pled guilty to 3 to 9, and from my understanding, the maximum would have been 14 years. But then there would have been a trial, and I did not want to go through that. No.
That would have just made things worse.
It was hard enough to go to court the 2 times I had to go.
Yeah. Well, Debbie, what is your message to our viewers out there? Because again, I mean, especially around the holidays, so many people have a drink, 2 drinks, 3 drinks, and again, it affects everybody so differently that they still get behind the wheel of a car, and you know they can do this to somebody else, just like it's happened to your family. What is it you want to say to the viewers out there watching?
I just really hope and pray that people just think and just think of what possibly could happen, and don't take that cavalier attitude that it's not going to happen to me, because it's very real. As everyone knows here, the way the driving is, it doesn't matter if you're drinking or not. The accidents are very prevalent on this island, and just please, if you're going to drink, then just don't drive.
Well, Debbie, thank you so much for sharing this story. I know this wasn't easy for you, and I feel terrible having to make you relive it here for us, but your story is so important, and even people I know have been affected by drunk drivers. You know, a friend of mine had lost her brother several years ago to a drunk driver, and it's always around, and stories like yours, I'm hoping that it puts an end to it, or makes people think twice at least. If we change one person's mind today, you know, we've done our job. So please, thank you. Stay with us the rest of the half hour, because I'm going to move on to representatives from the MAD program now. If you just tuned in today, we're talking about drunk driving and the after effects of what it does to victims' families. You just heard from Deborah and how her world was turned upside down by a drunk driver. Now I'd like to introduce Danielle Rella and Mary Scala. Did I say those correctly? Okay. They are both representatives from the MAD program, which is Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Ladies, thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to start with you, Danielle. You are actually the program specialist for MAD. What is your job in the MAD program?
Well, I oversee all of the programs that we do in high schools and to convicted offenders. Here on Long Island, in Suffolk, Nassau, and in some of the boroughs of the city. So Staten Island, Queens, Brooklyn, Bronx. We do programs where we speak to people who have been convicted of drunk driving, and we speak to them, we have victims speak to them and share their story, hoping that it'll humanize it and put, you know, kind of that personal side to it, so that they realize that this happens to people, and people are devastated by these tragedies and these, you know, these crimes, and to view it differently, so that hopefully they won't become repeat offenders. That's our goal. And with schools, we do a program, our signature program, flagship program is Power of Parents, where we speak to parents about how to talk to their children about alcohol use, and avoiding binge drinking, avoiding underage drinking, and then eventually when they become licensed, avoiding drunk driving. It's a fact that 1 out of 3 8th graders has already tried alcohol. So we want to try to get to these parents to talk to their children at that young of an age, because once they get to high school, the statistic goes to 3 out of 4 children have tried alcohol outside the home. Right. So we see such a jump from middle school to high school of how many children, how many kids are engaging in drinking alcohol. And then the statistics show that the dangerous behaviors and things like that increase, and then they're more likely to either get hurt or killed in alcohol-related, you know, tragedies. Right. So that's what we try to avoid by educating them. And our program, Power of Parents, is statistically and scientifically based and proven to work at reducing that risk.
Right, so both of you are no stranger to a story like Debbie's. I mean, what is your reaction to a story like her, and what's advice that you could offer her as a mom, you know, and a wife who lost the father of her children and her husband?
Yeah, I'm the victim advocate in the office, so I work with the families that have suffered a loss or someone that's been injured in a crash. And when I hear Debbie speak, you know, I thank her for speaking, because I know it's not easy. But she said so many things that we hear, and so many of the feelings that we hear from the victims and the victim survivors, as we call them. And it's so difficult. It's just so difficult. So mad.
So sad.
It's so sad. It's just tragic, and it didn't have to happen. And that's the thing that we have to keep pointing out. You know, if you want to drink, just don't drive. Make the plan. Think before you drink. Pass the keys. All those little sayings, they may be cliches, but they're true. You know, and you have a choice. And when people make that choice to drink and drive, then we have the tragedies such as Debbie is experiencing, and the loss of her husband and the father of her children. And her life will never be the same, and that's what people have to know. Their life will never be the same. But MAD is here to offer support to victim survivors through emotional support. We're good listeners. We listen to people, we talk, and I think just that listening ear is very, very important. And we have lots of information that we can share, brochures on things. We can give you referrals to grief therapists, to support groups, to things that may help you to cope with and learn how to deal with the feelings that you're experiencing. We have information about the Office of Victim Services, so we can tell victim survivors about compensation that they may receive, that they may be entitled to as a victim of a crime. And so we make them aware of that. I think one of the most important things we do as well is to work in the criminal justice system and offer us support through that, because as Debbie said, it's a really hard system, and she went twice, and it's awful to be in that courtroom. And so we provide court accompaniment. We help victim survivors write their victim impact statements. We work with the DA's office. We work with law enforcement. So we can offer that extra support as well. And we have a candlelight vigil each year. This year we just had our 31st in December. And it's a time where everybody can come together to honor the memory of their loved one. And we do that at Farmingdale State College. Wow. So just offering the support and being there for people.
It's an excellent program. It really is. I mean, I know a couple people who are involved with it, actually, myself. How did you two become involved, if you don't mind my asking? Well, what made you want to get involved, I should say?
For me, I have not suffered a loss because of drunk driving. I've made a choice to work at MAD. I heard about it so that there was an opportunity for a position as a victim advocate, and said, I want to do this. So I think MAD kind of called me, and I've been there 5 years now, and I'm inspired every day by the courage of people like Debbie and the other
So even
families.
though drunk driving's never affected you or your family, thank God.
No,
you know, you just want to be out there to help. That's
Yeah.
wow, that's terrific of you. Danielle, what about you?
I got involved about 4.5 years ago. My brother was hit by a drunk driver. He's a policeman, and he was on the Long Island Expressway, and he had one drunk driver pulled over, and he was attempting to arrest that drunk driver, and he was hit by another drunk driver.
Oh my goodness.
Both were unlicensed, sadly, as well, and he suffered very serious injury, a traumatic brain injury and a broken pelvis. But he was lucky enough, he's one of the lucky ones, even though he has a traumatic brain injury, to survive.
Wow.
So, you know, ever since then I've been volunteering, and then a few months ago, back in the fall, I had been approached about a job opportunity, so I felt it was only right and a natural fit for me and my calling and my passion to be able to do it full time.
Right.
So
Wow.
it's very rewarding.
It is, but it's so sad how you got involved. I mean, terrific that you did to help other people,
Yeah.
but what happened to
Yeah,
your
I always
brother?
say Ken had to sacrifice a lot for me to, you know,
Yeah.
get such a great job and, you know, such a good opportunity.
Now, where Debbie had mentioned where, you know, seeing somebody who takes a drink or is drinking, she kind of gets enraged by it, which I don't blame her. I mean, how do you feel when you see somebody just kind of take a drink. I mean, do you feel the same way knowing that this happened to your brother?
Yes, very angry, very offended personally, because a lot of them know the situation with me and choose to do that anyway. So it's even more selfish than if they didn't know. So it's just really egregiously selfish when they choose to do something like that. And I choose just to try not to engage with people like that. I try not to have toxic people in my life. Somebody who would do something like that obviously doesn't really care about me and my feelings as a person. So, you know,
It's
I
a very
try
selfish
not to
act,
have
it really is.
someone like that in my life, if I can help it. So.
Right. Well, ladies, thank you all so much for being here today and doing this difficult topic, and especially thank you to our representatives from the MAD program. Danielle, Mayor, if you'd like to leave a phone number to your office where you work, if people would like more information on the MAD program, other than mad.org, can they call you directly at your office?
Yeah, we have a website, mad.org/Long Island is our Long Island affiliate website, and then the phone number
Is 631-547-6233, which is 6233 is MAD.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, ladies, thank you so much again, and Deborah, thank you. I know this was not easy for you at all, but hopefully, like I said, by the end of this show, we'll at least get 1, 2, 3 people to change their minds before getting behind the wheel of a vehicle. We need to take a break here, and when we come back, there's more to come. Stay with us.
Thank you.
Thank you
for
guys
doing
so
the show.
much.
Yeah.
Half of all holiday driving fatalities are alcohol-related. About 30% of Americans are involved in alcohol-related accidents during their lifetime. Over 1.4 million drivers were arrested in 2010 for driving under the influence or narcotics.
Special thank you to Debbie for sharing her story with us today and what it's like to lose her husband and the father of her children to a drunk driver. Always remember, drunk driving is no accident. So if you're going to have a drink, pass your keys over to a friend. Never drink and drive. Thank you so much again, and thank you to the guests who were from MAD today. You can visit their website as well. Thank you for watching. See you next time.